A sun hadn't even fully risen yet, but on the old landfill site on the edge of town, a gaunt man in a torn shirt and worn-out trousers was bent over, sifting through the debris with a stick. His name was Silas, the one the townsfolk called the Waster. "Look, the scavenger's here," children would shout, laughing. He never answered, just quietly moved on. He had no stove at home, no one to talk to. His wife had left him years ago, taking the children back to her family in Burgundy. Since then, he'd lived alone in a derelict cottage at the edge of the Ardennes forest. That morning, Silas picked at a fresh pile of refuse. As he turned over the soil with his stick, his eyes caught something strange, a canvas sack, almost new, completely clean, no mud, no stains. It was tied shut with thick rope in heavy knots. "Who would throw this away?" he muttered. But when he tried to pull it, the sack felt oddly heavy, as if something solid was inside. Perhaps clothes, he thought. Glancing around to make sure no one was watching, he slowly dragged the sack to a secluded spot behind a veil of morning mist. He untied the rope. The sack opened, and his breath caught. Inside were bundles wrapped in plastic. With trembling hands, he opened one. The bundle of crisp new 500 euro notes dazzled his eyes. He sank to his knees, touching the notes with his fingertips. "Is this real?" he whispered. His hands began to shake. He looked around. Was anyone watching? After a few moments, he took a deep breath and decided. He retied the sack, hoisted it onto his back, and headed for his cottage. Every sound on the way made him suspicious. A dog barking, someone talking. Once home, he barred the door from inside, placed the sack in the corner, and covered it with an old blanket. Silas's heart pounded as if it might burst from his chest. He kept peering through the cracks in the door. Had anyone followed him? When he was certain no one was near, he sat down quietly beside the sack. His hands trembled, but he mustered the courage to untie it again. As the sack opened, the gleam inside blinded him. Bundle after bundle of fresh, new notes. Silas took out one bundle and began to count. His lips grew dry with the counting. Just one bundle held 100,000 euros. He estimated there must be at least 30 to 40 million in total. A thought made his mind go numb. No ordinary person could abandon such money, he murmured. A wave of fear ran through him. What if this belonged to some powerful man, a politician from Brussels, a trafficker from Marseille? If they started looking for it, what would happen? The thought drenched his body in sweat. Silas put the bundles back, retied the sack, and sat on the dirt floor, holding his head in his hands. Part of him felt joy. Years of poverty could now end. He could get medical treatment, build a new house, live a life of dignity. But fear gnawed at him from within. If anyone found out, they'd call him a thief. The gendarmes would arrest him, or the real owner would come after him. He lay awake all night. He reassured himself, if tomorrow I just take one bundle for treatment, who would know? The next day, for the first time, the doctor in the nearby town of Liège treated him with respect. He gave him medicine and said the treatment was possible. After years, a genuine smile appeared on Silas's face. He understood. This fortune was a test, not a blessing. The following day was a new dawn for Silas. For the first time in years, he looked at himself carefully in a cracked mirror. His face was worn, but his eyes now held a glimmer of hope. If he acted wisely, he thought, everything could change. Silas began with his cottage in the Ardennes. He withdrew a small sum from the sack, called in workers from Liège, and had the roof retiled. Within days, the damp and mustiness receded. The neighbors were astonished. "How has that scavenger suddenly changed?" they whispered. A few weeks later, he took his next step. He opened a modest provisions shop on the town square of Stavilo. On the first day, he stocked only pasta, rice, and salt. He sat behind the counter himself, greeting every customer with a quiet smile. At first, people were hesitant, but gradually they came. The shop found its rhythm. Bags of flour, tins of olive oil, herbs, soap, everything began to sell. Throughout this time, Silas exercised extreme caution. The fortune that had come to him was no less than a secret. He never flaunted it. He knew that the slightest display of wealth would invite a barrage of questions. So outwardly, he remained the same simple shopkeeper who smiled and said, "What can I get you, monsieur?" But inwardly, he knew the old canvas sack, hidden in his cottage, contained enough wealth to change not just his life, but many others. Sometimes, the elderly women of the town would remark, "Silas, you've changed so much." He would only smile, but inside, a sweet pride swelled. Who doesn't feel good when the world notices their transformation? Slowly, he expanded. Months later, he withdrew a bit more money and started a small storage depot. He bought an old delivery van and transformed from a mere seller into a supplier. People began calling him Silas the merchant from the Ardennes, as if he were a prominent tradesman. Yet amid this journey of progress, a constant fear lived inside him. At night when he sat by the sack, he thought, what if the secret is revealed? What if the true owner appears? Then he would console himself in the next breath. No, this is the reward of my fate. I suffered years of helplessness. This is the fruit of my patience. I stole no one's right. Time changed Silas himself. The man who once walked with his head down now walked straight, filled with confidence. His voice no longer held hesitation. It had steadiness. By day, he managed the shop. By evening, he oversaw the depot. At night, he sat by the sack and planned the next day. He had left his old self far behind. But it was also true. Even amid his progress, an emptiness still echoed within him. One evening, when he returned tired after closing the shop, two faces stood at his door, familiar yet distant. His wife, Anita, and both children. The children had grown now, but their faces bore shadows of hesitation and shame. Anita's eyes were wet. "Silas," she said softly, "we made a mistake. Circumstances forced us. It wasn't right to leave you." Silas's feet seemed to sink into the ground. Time stood still for a moment. He remembered the days when illness had broken him, when there was nothing to eat in the house, and Anita had said, "I cannot endure this," and left with the children. That was the night when Silas's world had fallen apart. Now that same Anita stood at his door. The children stepped forward. "Papa, please forgive us. We want to live with you now." Silas's heart trembled. On one side, he was a father who longed to embrace his children. On the other, he was the same broken man who had been abandoned. Had they returned out of love, or had the shine of wealth drawn them back? The question pierced him deeply. He said in a cold tone, "When I had empty hands, you all left. Now that I have something, you've returned. Is this love or greed?" Tears streamed from Anita's eyes. "No, Silas, we truly regret it now. The children need their father." Silas lowered his gaze. Inside, it was like a volcano erupting. He knew that sometimes it's easy to forgive, but not to forget. Finally, he said, "The children are mine, and no one can take away their right. I will take care of their education, their future. But Anita, the wall that has risen between us will never fall." Anita fell silent. There was relief in the children's eyes. At least their father was back in their lives. But Silas's old wound had turned raw again. The outside world said Monsieur Silas of the Ardennes was now a successful man. But inside, he was still the same Silas, swinging between past and present with his old canvas sack. That night, Silas couldn't sleep for a long time. He sat by the sack as if talking to an old friend. This fortune is returning everything: honor, name, a peaceful life. But can it return peace of mind? The question floated in the air, and only the silence of the walls answered. A few weeks passed. Silas's shop had now transformed into a small empire. Goods left the depot, vehicles came and went, and the townspeople now respectfully called him Brother Silas. In the outside world, everything was fine, but inside, there was a weight that settled on his chest every night. He would look at the sack and reassure himself. Perhaps some thief discarded it, or perhaps fate took pity on me. But fate seemed determined to test his patience. One evening, as he sipped tea in the courtyard, the news played inside on the television, the usual political noise he no longer paid attention to. But suddenly the anchor's voice sharpened. Breaking news: robbery at regional councillor's residence in Liège. Silas's heart stopped. The anchor reported that a thief had stolen money from the councillor's house and fled, hiding the cash somewhere when police gave chase. Authorities were still searching for it. The stolen amount totals several million euros. Smaller bundles may never be recovered, the anchor continued, but the investigation continues. Silas's hand trembled. His mind raced. The sack. That's the sack. The smaller bundles may never be recovered. Those words echoed in his ears, meaning his sack might still be safe. But an icy current ran through his veins. If anyone ever found out, if the gendarme showed up at his door. That night he tossed and turned. At the shop the next morning, his attention was scattered. Customers spoke while he answered in a daze. His mind ran calculations. If he kept everything hidden, he might survive. But if the secret broke, it would all be over. Returning home that evening, he opened the sack again. The notes still gleamed, but now the shine felt menacing. It was as if the money had eyes glaring at him. Silas put the bundles back and whispered to himself, "This fortune can both save me and destroy me." From that day, he made a resolution. No more haste. He would withdraw small amounts, spend slowly, so no one would suspect. But inside, a new wound had opened. Every time he counted the notes, his hands trembled. Yet life went on. During this time, a man came from a neighboring village to buy supplies. With him was his sister, Salome, a simple woman who had lost her husband to illness 2 years earlier and now helped her brother with his work. When Silas first spoke with her, he felt a strange peace. There was no pretense in Salome's words, no ulterior motive. She saw him not as a merchant, but as a man. Gradually, she began visiting the shop, sometimes with her brother, sometimes alone. Each time, her gentle humility eased the weariness from Silas's day. One day, Salome smiled and said, "You're very hard-working, Silas. Everyone in the village respects you." Silas only smiled in return, but inside, an unnamed feeling stirred. Perhaps money can make a man secure, he thought, but only someone's belonging keeps him alive. When Salome said, "You're an honorable man," something melted within him. After years, someone had shown him respect, and from a kind woman at that. A coolness settled in his chest. Slowly, a tender bond began to grow between them. Salome didn't just listen, she understood. When she learned of Silas's past, she didn't express pity. Instead, she looked into his eyes and said, "What has passed was a trial of time. Now it's important that you move forward." Those words ignited a new flame within him. A few months later, he made a decision. He would marry Salome. When the news spread through the village, gossip erupted. Some sneered, "The scavenger is taking a new wife." Others laughed, "Well, at least the poor man's life will have some light now." Silas answered none of it. He knew this marriage wasn't just for companionship, but to give himself a new life. The wedding was simple. No fanfare, no crowd of guests. Just 2 witnesses, some flowers, and a new beginning for 2 hearts. After Salome arrived, Silas's house seemed to breathe again. When he returned home tired from the shop, she would open the door with a smile. That smile was neither costly nor artificial, but genuine and warm. These small things gave him a peace that no fortune could buy. Still, when night deepened and Salome slept, Silas's mind would return to the sack. It wouldn't let him rest. Every time, the gleam of the notes reminded him this fortune wasn't pure. He thought, if this money is linked to a crime, how can it bring me peace? These thoughts slowly led him to a great decision. Silas resolved this money would no longer be just his. It would be used for others. He remembered well how poverty strips a man of his dignity. Those taunts, that contempt, the days when the clinic staff looked at him with disdain. All of it was still alive in his memories. And then one morning, he took his first step. The old village church was leaking in the rain. Worshippers had to carry umbrellas inside. Silas began quietly donating funds. When the amount was sufficient, he put his name forward. The village was in an uproar. That same Silas who scavenged. Where did so much money come from? Some taunted, some expressed suspicion. Maybe he won it in gambling. But as the church walls rose, Silas's intentions became clear. People saw he wasn't helping for show, but with a sincere heart. Slowly, the criticism died down, and villagers began calling him Monsieur Silas with respect. The man society had once rejected had become its pillar. Silas took another major step in his life. This time, he decided to invest not with money, but with heart. He announced, "I will open a school in the village where every poor child can study for free." At first, people thought it was just an emotional statement. But when the first foundation stone was laid, everyone understood. Silas was no longer just a merchant. He had become the village leader. Salome supported him too, shoulder to shoulder. Some young teachers agreed to teach for modest salaries. Some called it a miracle. Others prayed, "May God protect such people." Silas invested the remaining money into more trade, and in doing so, he truly became a very wealthy man. Now he had no need for that sack. His earnings alone were so great that he now did business in the billions. But still, he felt grateful and helped the poor. He built a large villa and a hotel for his first wife and children in London. His first wife also lived happily with her children. Silas's story also makes you think about what a man's true struggle is between truth, regret, and goodness. And please, give it a like. Tell us in the comments, if you were in Silas's place, what would you do? Can good done with wrong money be considered right? Your opinion is very valuable to us.